It's a Saturday afternoon, sometime in the 1980s, and you're a kid riding along in the front of the shopping cart. The store is big and it's bright and it smells faintly like popcorn and warm vinyl. Up near the front, there's a machine churning out those Icees in a blue so bright it doesn't exist anywhere in nature. Your mom's got a list. You've got your eye on the toy aisle. And then it happens. A voice comes crackling over the loudspeaker, a little tinny, a little bored. Attention Kmart shoppers. And somewhere 3 aisles over, a blue light starts spinning on a metal pole. And for the next 15 minutes, whatever is sitting under that light is cheaper than it has any right to be. Hold on to that feeling for a second, because it does not last. If you're over 50, you don't have to imagine any of that. You lived it. You heard that voice, and some part of you actually turned your cart toward the sound because you never knew what it was going to be. Wrapping paper, a toaster, a stack of towels. Didn't matter. It was a little race, and you were in it. And for a long stretch there, this was the biggest discount store in America. Bigger than Walmart. Bigger than Target. Almost 2,400 of them, spread out across every state. More stores than Sears, more sales than anybody. If you had stood in a Kmart parking lot back in 1990 and told the people loading up their trunks that in 30 years this whole thing would be gone, they would have laughed right in your face. Because today there is basically one left. A little room in a strip mall down in Miami, about the size of a corner drugstore, playing 80s pop to almost nobody. At least that's how the story goes here in America. Because on the other side of the world, this exact same story ends completely differently. Hold on to that one. It is going to matter more than you think. So how does that happen? How does something that big, that everywhere, that woven into ordinary American life just quietly disappear, while nobody's really looking? Here's the thing. Nobody killed Kmart with one clean blow. There was no single villain, no one bad night. It was 3 separate forces, and each one took a little. I'm going to hand you all 3, one at a time, like pieces of evidence, and by the end, you'll see exactly how they fit together. Let's get into it. Our story starts with a man who was frankly one of the cheapest human beings who ever lived. And I mean that as a compliment. His name was Sebastian Kresge. A farm kid out of Pennsylvania, born just after the Civil War. And he had a relationship with money that bordered on religious. He used to brag that he'd never once spent more than 30 cents on lunch in his entire life, and it hadn't killed him yet. He wore his shoes until they fell apart. He'd reused the same envelope 3 or 4 times. This was not a man who threw a nickel around like it was a manhole cover. He started out as a traveling salesman, hauling hardware and tinware around the Northeast, and along the way, he crossed paths with a fellow named Frank Woolworth, who was building these new stores where everything cost 5 or 10 cents. Kresge looked at that and thought, I want in on that. Woolworth turned him down flat as a partner. So Kresge went and did it himself. Around 1900, he plants his flag on Woodward Avenue in downtown Detroit. The sign in the window said, nothing over 10 cents in store, and people poured in. Because back then, a place where a working family could actually afford everything on the shelf was close to a miracle. By the time he was done, Kresge had hundreds of these 5 and dime stores. He lived to be 99 years old, gave away a fortune, and stayed cheap right up to the very end. He built the foundation. But he didn't build Kmart. The man who did that was named Harry Cunningham. Now, by the late 1950s, the old 5 and dime was getting tired. A new idea was coming up fast. The discount store. A big box out by the highway that sold everything under one roof for less. And Cunningham, who had worked his way up from assistant store manager, spent years quietly studying it. He'd drive out to these new discounters, walk the aisles, count the registers, take his notes, and then he did something that nearly got him run out of the company. He bet the whole thing on it. The old guard was furious. They thought he was going to burn the place down. Instead, on a spring day in 1962, the first real Kmart opened its doors in Garden City, Michigan, 80,000 square feet. Everything cheaper than the department store downtown. And here's a detail I love, because it tells you the whole future in one line. In 1962, that exact same year, 2 other stores opened their very first location. One was called Target, and the other was a little outfit down in Arkansas run by a guy named Sam Walton. It was called Walmart. 3 babies born the same year. And for a long, long time, Kmart was the big brother who won every single fight. Now I want you to actually walk inside one of these places with me, because if you're over 50, this is where the memory really lives. You come through those doors and the first thing that hits you is that it's big and it's bright and it smells like popcorn and hot vinyl. Off to one side there's a little cafeteria, and somewhere in there is the pizza and that Icee machine. And a lunch counter where your mom parks you with a hot dog while she shops. And then there's the layaway counter in the back. And if you grew up without a lot of money, you know exactly what that counter meant. It meant Christmas was actually going to happen. You'd pick out the bike in October, they'd hold it in the back for you. Your mom would come in every couple of weeks and put a few dollars down on it, and then, on some cold morning in December, that bike came home. That counter, quietly, was where a whole lot of American families kept their dignity. And the racks. Jaclyn Smith, the actress, had her name on a whole line of clothes, one of the first times a real celebrity ever did that. Years later, it would be Martha Stewart's sheets and towels, Route 66 jeans. This was the stuff that dressed the entire middle of the country. And over all of it, every so often, that voice, that light. So here's the real question. What was Kmart actually selling? Because it wasn't really selling cheap stuff. Everybody sold cheap stuff. Here's the truth of it, and I want you to hold on to this one, because it explains everything that comes later. Kmart was selling the surprise. The hunt. That little jolt of maybe today's the day, when that blue light started spinning, and you didn't know what was underneath it. You didn't drive to Kmart because it was the cheapest. You drove to Kmart because it was fun, because you just might win something. Kmart was selling the light. Remember that. Okay, now I'm going to start handing you those guns, and I want you to watch where I set each one down, because all 3 of them go off before we're through. Here's the first one, and it's the boring one, which is exactly why it turned out to be so deadly. While Kmart was busy being fun, Sam Walton was busy being ruthless about something nobody could see. Plumbing, the back end. The unglamorous machinery of getting a box off a truck and onto a shelf. Walton built these enormous regional warehouses so that every single Walmart was within about a day's drive of one. He put computers on his inventory before anybody else even thought it mattered. He knew, hour by hour, what was selling and what wasn't, and he could refill a shelf almost before it went empty. Kmart? Kmart's back end was a mess. It actually ran 2 separate systems that didn't even talk to each other, one for the clothes and one for everything else. And as late as the 1990s, it still couldn't produce one clean picture of what it had and what it needed. So you'd get the flashing blue light, the big sale, everybody comes running, and then the shelf is bare. The stuff is sitting in a box, in the back, and nobody knows it's there. Circle that. That's gun number 1. The store that sold the surprise couldn't keep its own shelves full, loaded, and sitting there for years. Now let me drop a person into this, because I don't want you drowning in warehouses. That famous blue light? Total accident. 1965, a store out in Fort Wayne, Indiana. A manager's got a pile of something that just will not sell, and on a whim, he grabs one of those portable, flashing, police-style lights and sticks it up over the pile and has somebody get on the intercom. People swarm it. It works so well that the whole company steals the idea, and within a few years that spinning blue light and that Attention Kmart shoppers line are so famous that Johnny Carson is doing jokes about them on late-night television. The single most iconic thing Kmart ever did, and it started because one guy needed to move some junk. On a slow afternoon. All right, gun number 2. By the 1980s, there's a man climbing his way to the top of Kmart named Joseph Antonini. Sharp, confident, a company lifer, and by 1987, he is running the whole show. And Antonini looks at his aging stores, and then he looks at this scrappy little Walmart coming up fast behind him, and he makes a decision that sounds awfully smart at the time, and turns out to be fatal. He decides he is not going to win by fixing Kmart, he is going to win by buying up everything else. The stores were aging, the magic was fading, and the obvious move, the boring move, was to pour that money right back into the Kmarts themselves, freshen them up, fix the plumbing, fight Walmart head on. Antonini didn't do that. Instead, he went out and started buying other companies. A whole armful of them. They bought the bookstore chains, Walden Books, and later Borders. They bought Sports Authority. They bought a big chunk of Office Max. They bought a home improvement chain and a warehouse club chain and a drugstore chain. For about a decade, Kmart's attention and Kmart's money went absolutely everywhere except the stores with the big red K on the sign. And here's the punchline. Almost none of it worked out. By the late 90s, they had sold off basically every one of those companies, sometimes taking a real beating on the way out the door. They spent 10 years and a mountain of cash, buying everything except a future for their own business. That's gun number 2. Loaded. And sitting there. And Joseph Antonini? He never even saw the knockout punch coming. While he was flying around the country, cutting ribbons on brand new sporting goods stores and bookshops, Sam Walton was back home, quietly stacking up warehouses. And by the mid-90s, with the stores fading and the magic draining out of them and Walmart breathing right down his neck, the board had finally seen enough. In 1995, they pushed Joseph Antonini out the door. The man who bet the entire company on buying the future, gone, before he ever got to see how the story actually ended. And here's another face for you, because this stretch is where the whole culture peaks. 1988. A movie comes out called Rain Man. Dustin Hoffman plays a man who insists, absolutely insists, that his underwear has to come from Kmart, and Tom Cruise just loses his mind, and the line "Kmart sucks" ends up in a Best Picture winner. Then Kmart signs Martha Stewart, and pretty soon her sheets and towels alone are doing something like $1 billion a year inside the stores. So on the outside, Kmart looks huge and healthy and famous, but on the inside the shelves are half empty and the money is flying out the door. Now the third gun. This one's the quiet one, and it doesn't go off for years, so you might just forget it's even there. Don't. Every single Kmart sat on a piece of land, a big box, a big parking lot, usually in a pretty decent spot. And here's the thing nobody was really saying out loud back in the good years. A lot of that real estate, the actual dirt, was worth a fortune. Sometimes it was worth more than the store standing on top of it was even making. Which means that one day somebody was going to look at Kmart and not see a store at all. They were going to see the land. And they were going to want it. Gun number 3. Loaded, sitting out there in the parking lot, just waiting. But before those guns go off, let me take you all the way to the top, because you really should see this thing at full height before it falls. The early 90s. This is the summit. Kmart has somewhere around 2,400 stores. It employs roughly 370,000 people, which is a small city's worth of human beings. In its best year, it rings up around $37 billion in sales. It has passed Sears. And it is, for one shining moment, the #1 retailer in the entire country. Just think about that. #1. Not #1 in discount. #1. Period. If you were alive and shopping in America in the early 90s, you were almost certainly closer to a Kmart than to any other store of its kind. It was the default. It was just there, the way the sky is there. And that, right there, is as high as it ever gets. Remember that number, 2,400 stores, because we are about to watch it fall all the way down to 1. If you're enjoying this trip back, take a second and hit that subscribe button, because I go deep on one of these lost American brands every single week. The stores and the diners and the names you grew up with that quietly slipped away. All right, now, let's watch it come apart. The first gun goes off in November of 1990. That's the month Walmart quietly passes Kmart in sales and becomes the biggest retailer in America. Now, Kmart doesn't collapse overnight, nothing that big ever does. But that's the moment the ground shifts underneath it. Because now, Kmart is stuck in the single worst spot there is. Walmart is underneath it, hammering it on price, always cheaper and always in stock. And Target is above it, going after the shopper with a little more money, making discount feel almost stylish. Kmart is caught right in the middle. And the middle is where retailers go to die. And remember Gun 1, those empty shelves? Now, it's fatal. Kmart tries to fight Walmart on price, tries to match it dollar for dollar, and it just can't. Its costs are higher, its back end is slower, its shelves are emptier. You show up, the light spins, and the surprise you came for isn't there. Bit by bit, the fun just leaks right out of the place. And once the fun is gone, all that's left is a store that isn't quite as cheap as the one across the street. And into all this walks a new boss named Charles Conaway right around the turn of the millennium. And he brings in a crew of young executives that people inside the company started calling the frat boys. Big spenders, big talk, and they make one huge bet. They launch an all-out price war against Walmart, and to stock up for it, they massively overorder. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of stuff bought on borrowed money. It doesn't work. The stuff just piles up. The cash runs out. And to keep the doors open, Kmart starts stretching out its payments to the very companies that supply it, holding back money it owes. All while telling the public that everything is just fine. It was not fine. Later on, the government would come after Conaway for misleading investors about how bad things really were, and a jury would find him on the hook for it. But in the moment, all anybody knew was that after a disappointing Christmas in 2001, the suppliers got spooked. And when the company that delivered Kmart's food finally stopped delivering over a single missed payment, that was the end of the pretending. January 22nd, 2002. Kmart files for bankruptcy. The biggest retail bankruptcy in American history up to that point. The biggest ever, the stock, which had once traded up in the double digits, closed on the day of the filing at 70 cents. 70 cents. And within about a year, they closed 600 stores and cut tens of thousands of jobs. Tens of thousands of people who just the year before had a place to go on Monday morning. Now, Kmart doesn't actually die right here. And in a strange way, what happens next is worse than dying. Because it's so much slower. Enter a man named Eddie Lampert. Lampert ran a hedge fund. He was not a store guy, he was a money guy, and a very, very smart one. While Kmart was drowning in bankruptcy, he quietly bought up huge amounts of its debt, for pennies on the dollar. And when the dust finally settled, he owned the thing. He controlled Kmart. And here's where gun number 3 finally goes off. Remember the land? That real estate? Worth more than the stores? Lampert saw it. In fact, a lot of the people watching Kmart's stock suddenly climb back up weren't betting on the stores at all. They were betting on the dirt underneath them. In 2005, Lampert uses Kmart to pull off something audacious. He buys Sears, the old giant, the granddaddy of American retail. And he bolts the two of them together into one company. On paper, it's the third biggest retailer in the country. 2 wounded legends stitched into one. But here's what the critics say happened next, and the numbers back them up. Lampert didn't really run it like a man trying to save 2 stores. He ran it like a man carving up an estate. He sold off the crown jewels one by one. Land's End, gone. Craftsman tools, that name your dad trusted his whole life, gone, sold off to somebody else. He spun off big piles of the real estate into a whole separate company. And the stores themselves? He starved them. He famously did not want to spend the money on fresh paint and new fixtures and clean floors. And you could feel it the second you walked in. If you went into a Kmart in those years, you remember. The lights flickering overhead, the carpet worn right through, half the shelves empty, not because of some sale, but because nobody was refilling them. Whole sections roped off. It stopped feeling like a treasure hunt and started feeling like walking through somebody's house after they'd already moved out. And that, right there, is the murder weapon. Remember the thesis. Kmart sold the surprise. Kmart sold the light. Well, you cannot sell surprise in a store with empty shelves and burned out bulbs. They took the one thing that made Kmart special, the fun, the hunt, the maybe today, and they quietly let it die, in the dark, to save a little money on carpet. Now, before I walk you through the very end, I have to tell you one thing, because it is going to make everything that comes next hurt just a little bit more. Here's what almost nobody in America knows. Kmart is not actually dead. Not everywhere. Because on the complete opposite side of the planet down in Australia, there is a whole chain of stores called Kmart. And right now, today, it is thriving. More than 300 of them. Packed on the weekends. Genuinely beloved. A totally different company owns the name down there, and they ran it the way the original never quite could. So keep that tucked in the back of your mind as we watch the American Kmart die. Because it means that none of this was fate. It did not have to end this way at all, but it did. So let me take you back to America and that long, slow bleed. And I'll be honest with you, this is the hardest stretch to watch, because there's no drama left in it. There's no big villain moment. There's just a company. Closing stores. Year after year after year. 100 here, 200 there. Every January, another list. In 2018, the whole Sears and Kmart company files for bankruptcy all over again, and the closures just keep right on coming. That number that was 2,400 stores at the peak drops to 1,000, then to the hundreds, then lower and lower, and you almost stop paying attention because it's the same sad headline every few months. But I don't want you to see this as a spreadsheet, because every single one of those closings was somebody's whole world. So let me tell you about just one of them. 19 years. That's how long a man named Josh Englert worked at the Kmart in McMurray, Pennsylvania. He'd started there as a teenager, a 16-year-old kid running a register. And he worked his way all the way up until he was running the whole store by his early 20s. 19 years of his life inside one building. And when they finally closed his store down, he got on that same intercom, the one that used to say "Attention Kmart shoppers," and he made one last announcement. He didn't try to sell anybody a thing. He got up there and he thanked them. He told them he wasn't there to move any more merchandise. He was there to thank them for a lifetime of memories. He called that store his second home, and he called the people who worked for him his second family, and he told the whole town that he was the man he'd become because of the years he spent inside that building. People cried. He cried. Somebody filmed it, and it went all the way around the world because everybody who saw it understood exactly what they were watching. It wasn't a store closing, it was a whole way of life. Switching off the lights. And so we come to the end. And the end is almost unbearably quiet. October 2024, the last full-size Kmart on the American mainland out in Bridgehampton, New York, spends its final day. And here's the strange, beautiful thing about it. People came. From all over. One man drove 4.5 hours just to be there because he'd already missed the last Sears, and he swore to himself he would not miss this one too. And they all walked the mostly empty aisles like it was a funeral. Because it was. Everything got marked down to almost nothing. A single penny on some of the items, and over the speakers, on that very last day of all things, they were playing Avril Lavigne. And then, the doors closed for good, which leaves us right back where we started. That one little store down in Miami. And it's not even really a Kmart anymore. Not truly. They leased most of the space away to another chain, and what's left of Kmart got shoved into a couple of small rooms, about the size of a drugstore, over in what used to be the garden department. Sparse shelves, 80s music playing to no one, and a faded old sign, still standing there, still promising blue light specials, to a store where almost nobody ever comes. And now, remember what I told you. Remember those 300 stores on the far side of the world. Because while this one little room in Miami plays its 80s music to nobody, that other Kmart, the Australian one, is out there right now, packed with families on a Saturday afternoon. Same name, same red and blue, a completely different ending. And that, I think, is the part that should really stay with you. The American Kmart did not die because a store with that name couldn't survive. It died because of what a small handful of people chose to do with it. Somebody on the other side of the world took the exact same name and kept it alive. And ours, we just let go. So who killed Kmart? And the honest answer is nobody did. Not really. Walmart took a little with its warehouses and its low prices. The bosses took a little, chasing all those companies they never should have bought. The empty shelves took a little every single time that blue light spun over nothing. And Eddie Lampert took a little, stripping it down for the land underneath. Nobody killed Kmart. They each just took a little, and one day somebody looked underneath all of it, and there was nothing left holding it up. And I keep coming back to that light. That silly, wonderful, flashing blue light up on a pole, the thing that could make an entire store come running, just because you never knew what you might win. Somewhere out there in some back room, one of them is probably still sitting in a box, right now. And nobody is ever coming for it again. So do me a favor, down in the comments, tell me which Kmart was yours. What town, what corner. Tell me what you put on layaway, what you bought under that blue light, whether you got the pizza or the Icee. Because I know a whole lot of you were there, and I really want to hear it. And if this one took you back, hit subscribe and stick around, because there's a whole graveyard of these old American names out there, and I'm digging up one more of them next week.